The camera pans across a scene of pure elegance. Crystal glasses clink, laughter echoes under a canopy of fairy lights, and at the center of it all stands Emilia Carter, radiant in a sapphire dress, blowing out the candles on her 30th birthday cake. Her husband, Daniel, has his arm wrapped securely around her waist, his smile as bright as the flashbulbs from their friends' phones. It's a perfect picture, a life curated for envy, streamed live for all her followers to see. But perfection is a fragile thing. In seconds, that picture will be torn apart, not by a gentle breeze, but by a hurricane in human form, a woman standing at the edge of the patio, her shadow falling over the celebration. The truth is about to detonate, and the one holding the fuse isn't who anyone expects. The air in the Carters' manicured backyard was thick with the scent of night-blooming jasmine and expensive champagne. For her 30th birthday, Daniel had spared no expense. A string quartet played softly near the illuminated pool, a renowned chef from downtown's hottest restaurant, Aura, manned a bespoke tasting station, and Emilia's closest friends and family, a curated collection of society's finest, mingled on the sprawling stone patio. Emilia Carter felt a dizzying sense of contentment. She smoothed down the silk of her custom-made dress, a gift from Daniel, its deep blue color matching the sapphire necklace he'd clasped around her neck just an hour ago. "To 30, my love," he'd whispered, his breath warm against her ear. "The best is yet to come." She believed him. Their life was a testament to his ambition and her grace. Daniel Carter was a rising star in his family's lucrative real estate development firm, Carter Holdings, a company built from the ground up by his formidable late father. Daniel had the charm, the looks, and the relentless drive that made men respect him and women adore him, and he had chosen her, Emilia, a gallery curator with a modest upbringing, to be his wife, the mother of their two beautiful children, 7-year-old Leo and 5-year-old Charlotte, who were currently having the time of their lives with a privately hired magician inside. "He adores you, you know." Emilia turned to see her mother-in-law, Margaret Carter, standing beside her. Margaret was a woman carved from granite and grace. In her late 60s, she possessed a quiet intensity that could be unnerving. Dressed in a simple but exquisitely tailored charcoal pantsuit, she held a glass of mineral water, her gaze sweeping over the party with an unreadable expression. Since her husband's passing 5 years prior, she had ceded the company's day-to-day operations to Daniel, but remained the matriarchal head of the family, her influence silent but absolute. "I know, Margaret," Emilia smiled. "I'm the luckiest woman in the world." Margaret's eyes, a pale, piercing blue, settled on Daniel, who was across the patio laughing with a city councilman. He pulled out his phone, his thumb swiping quickly across the screen before he pocketed it, his smile never faltering. Margaret's gaze lingered for a moment longer than comfortable. "Luck is a fickle thing, dear," she said, her voice low. "It's stability and honesty that build a life." Before Emilia could decipher the cryptic remark, her best friend Sarah bounced over, phone in hand. Sarah was a successful lifestyle influencer, and her nearly 1 million followers were currently getting a front-row seat to the festivities. "Em, you look stunning. The stream is going crazy. Everyone is saying knocked our couple goals and Hochta Carter's birthday bash," Sarah gushed, flipping the phone to show Emilia the flood of comments. "We're live. Say hi to the world." Emilia laughed, waving at the tiny lens. "Thank you all for the birthday wishes. I feel so blessed." Daniel strode over, seamlessly rejoining the group. He kissed Emilia's temple, a perfect performance for the camera. "Anything for my queen," he said, his voice smooth as velvet. He glanced at Sarah's phone. "Keep it rolling, Sarah. a night this perfect deserves to be remembered. It was at that precise moment, as Daniel's words hung in the perfumed air, that the perfection shattered. A voice, sharp and cold, cut through the music and laughter from the edge of the patio. Remembered? Oh, I guarantee, Daniel. No one will ever forget tonight. All heads turned. Standing there, framed by the grand archway leading from the side garden, was a woman. She was young, perhaps in her mid-20s, with fiery red hair and a defiant set to her jaw. She wore a simple black dress that did little to conceal the pronounced swell of her stomach. She was heavily pregnant. The string quartet faltered, a violin screeching into the sudden, deafening silence. The guests froze, champagne glasses hovering midway to their lips. Sarah's hand, holding the phone, remained steady, the live stream capturing every unfolding second. Amelia felt the blood drain from her face. She didn't know this woman, but the way the woman's venomous glare was fixed solely on her husband told her everything she needed to know. Daniel's face had gone rigid, the charming smile dissolving into a mask of pale, frozen shock. The woman took a step forward, her voice ringing out with chilling clarity. "Happy birthday, Amelia. I'm Isabella. I'd say it's a pleasure to meet you, but your husband has already told me so much about his cold, boring wife. I just thought it was time you and I had a chat. About him. And about his son." She placed a protective hand on her swollen belly, the one he's been refusing to acknowledge for the past 3 months. The world tilted on its axis. Amelia's first thought was that this was a mistake, a horrible, cruel prank. This couldn't be happening. Not here. Not now. Not in the middle of her perfect party, with her perfect life being broadcast to 1 million strangers. The silence was a physical weight, pressing down on them all. Every eye in the garden was locked on the triangle of 3 people: the stunned wife, the terrified husband, and the pregnant mistress. Daniel was the first to break the paralysis. He moved with a jerky, unnatural speed, stepping in front of Amelia as if to shield her, though it felt more like he was trying to block Isabella's path. "What the hell are you doing here, Isabella?" he hissed, his voice a low, dangerous growl that Amelia had never heard before. "You need to leave. Right now." Isabella laughed, a sound utterly devoid of humor. "Leave? I'm not going anywhere, Daniel. Not until your wife knows exactly what kind of man she's married to." She looked past his shoulder, her eyes finding Amelia's again. The pity and triumph warring in her gaze made Amelia's stomach churn. "He told me you two were basically separated," Isabella continued, her voice rising, ensuring everyone could hear. "That you lived separate lives under the same roof for the sake of the children. He said your marriage was a business arrangement, a cold, loveless sham." Each word was a physical blow. Amelia staggered back a step, her hand flying to her mouth. She felt Margaret's hand, firm and steady, on her elbow, holding her up. The city councilman Daniel had been schmoozing with was now backing away slowly, his face a mask of horrified fascination. Sarah, ever the influencer, had slowly lowered her phone, but the red light indicating it was still recording was blinking, a malevolent eye capturing the demolition of Amelia's life in high definition. The comment feed, Amelia knew, would be a waterfall of shock and speculation. "That's a lie," Daniel finally roared, his composure cracking completely. "This woman is delusional. I barely know her. She's a stalker. She's been harassing me for months." He turned to the stunned guests. "I'm so sorry, everyone. This is a private security matter. She's unwell." Isabella's expression hardened into something formidable. "Unwell? Is that what you call it?" She reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. With a few taps, she held it up. The screen showed a photo. It was Daniel, shirtless and smiling, asleep in a bed that wasn't their own. The distinctive pattern of the headboard, a custom design from a boutique hotel they'd once considered for a weekend getaway, was unmistakable. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. "I have hundreds of these," Isabella said, her voice dropping to a deadly calm. "Texts, voicemails, the reservation confirmations for our trips to Napa and Lake Como. Trips you told your wife were business conferences." Amelia felt the air leave her lungs. Napa, Lake Como. The long weekends he'd been so sorry to miss family events for. The expensive gifts he'd brought back for her and the children. Guilt offerings she'd been too blind to recognize. "He told me he was going to leave you after the holidays," Isabella pressed on, her eyes welling with tears that seemed genuine. "He said he was just waiting for the right time. He helped me pick out a name for our son, for Noah." The name hung in the air, an invisible, weighty thing. Noah. Daniel lunged for Isabella's phone, but she was too quick, snatching it back. "Don't you touch me!" she shrieked. The chaos was absolute. Guests were murmuring, pulling out their own phones to record. The string quartet had packed their instruments and were trying to discreetly flee the scene. The magician had poked his head out the back door, seen the drama, and promptly vanished back inside with the children. Amelia's mind was a whirlwind of betrayal and humiliation. Every shared smile, every whispered, "I love you," every promise for the future now felt like a lie. Her life wasn't a fairy tale. It was a stage play, and she was the only one who hadn't been given a script. She finally found her voice, a broken, trembling whisper. "Daniel, is it true?" He wouldn't look at her. His eyes were wild, darting between Isabella and the shocked faces of his friends and colleagues. His entire world, his carefully constructed reputation, was imploding live on the internet. "Of course it's not true, baby," he said, his voice pleading, desperate. "She's lying. She doctored those pictures. She's trying to extort me. We'll call the police. We'll get a restraining order." But his denial was hollow. The panic in his eyes was the truth. It was then that Margaret Carter, who had been a silent, solid presence at Amelia's side, finally moved. She stepped forward, her posture radiating an authority that silenced the murmurs. She didn't look at Isabella. She didn't look at the guests. She looked directly at her son. "Daniel," she said, her voice as cold and clear as ice water. "Stop talking." She then turned to the shell-shocked Amelia and the tearful Isabella. Her next words stunned everyone into a new, deeper silence. "No one is calling the police, and no one is leaving." She looked toward Sarah, whose phone was still faithfully documenting the carnage. "Sarah, dear, keep that stream running. In fact, point it right here." She gestured to the space between the three of them. "It seems this family has some truth to discuss, and I, for one, think the world should hear it." A new wave of shock rolled through the partygoers. If they had been expecting Margaret Carter to circle the wagons, to protect her son and the family name at all costs, they were dead wrong. Her command to keep the live stream running was so counterintuitive, so utterly bizarre, that it reset the entire dynamic of the confrontation. Daniel stared at his mother as if she'd grown a second head. "Mother, what are you doing? Turn that damn thing off. This is a private matter." "It stopped being a private matter the moment Isabella walked onto this patio, Daniel," Margaret replied, her tone leaving no room for argument. She turned her attention to Isabella, her pale blue eyes assessing the younger woman, not with anger, but with a strange, clinical curiosity. "And it certainly stopped being private the moment you decided to sire a child outside of your marriage." Isabella flinched but held her ground. "He promised me." I'm sure he promised you many things, Margaret interrupted coolly. My son is very good at making promises. This was Margaret's gambit. She was taking control, transforming a chaotic, emotional ambush into a structured, albeit terrifyingly public, tribunal. By embracing the live stream, she was seizing the narrative. The online audience, now numbering in the tens of thousands, was no longer just a passive observer of a scandal. They were a jury. Amelia felt numb, a ghost at her own party. She was vaguely aware of Sarah repositioning herself, a grim look of journalistic duty on her face as she framed Margaret, Daniel, and Isabella in the shot. The comments must be flying, a torrent of digital judgment. Her life was now content, a viral train wreck. "All right," Margaret announced, her voice carrying across the silent yard. "Let's have it, all of it. No more whispers or back-alley accusations." She looked at Isabella. "You claim this child is my grandchild. You claim my son promised to leave his wife for you. Present your evidence." Then she turned to Daniel. "And you, Daniel. You claim this woman is an extortionist and a stalker. You claim her accusations are lies. Prepare your defense." It was surreal. It was insane. It was happening. Daniel, looking cornered and desperate, began to bluster. "This is ridiculous. I will not be cross-examined by my own mother on a live feed. Amelia, honey, let's go inside. We can sort this out." He reached for Amelia's arm, but she pulled away, as if his touch was scalding. The numbness was beginning to recede, replaced by a slow-burning, righteous anger. "Sort this out, Daniel. You lied to me for months, maybe years. You stood right there an hour ago and told me the best was yet to come." Her voice cracked. Was this it? Was this the surprise? Before he could answer, Isabella spoke, her voice thick with emotion, but gaining strength from Margaret's unexpected platform. "He's been lying to both of us. He told me you two hadn't been intimate in over a year. He showed me divorce papers he said he was getting ready to file." "Divorce papers?" Amelia choked out, looking at her husband's ashen face. "She's lying," Daniel insisted, his voice pitching higher in panic. "There are no papers." "Then what was this?" Isabella swiped on her phone again and held it up. It was a screenshot of an email sent from Daniel's official work address. The subject line read, "Draft. Marital Settlement Agreement." Amelia's heart hammered against her ribs. She recognized the format. It looked real. Daniel's defense was crumbling with every piece of digital evidence Isabella produced. He was a cornered animal, and his next move was to lash out. "Fine. You want the truth?" He spat, his eyes wild. He was no longer speaking to Isabella or his mother, but to the invisible audience, to his friends, to anyone who would listen. "Yes, I had an affair. Maybe I did. But do you know what it's like to live with someone so passionless? Someone who is more interested in art auctions and charity luncheons than her own husband?" He gestured wildly at Amelia. "Our marriage was dead long before I met Isabella. I stayed for the children, for the family image." The cruelty of his words was breathtaking. He wasn't just confessing. He was trying to destroy Amelia's character to save his own. He was painting her as the frigid, neglectful wife, the architect of her own betrayal. Tears streamed freely down Amelia's face now, hot tears of humiliation and fury. How dare he? How dare he twist their life into this ugly caricature to justify his own weakness? But through her own pain, a strange realization dawned. Margaret wasn't reacting. As her son viciously tore down his wife, the mother's face remained a stony, unreadable mask. She wasn't defending Amelia. She wasn't chastising Daniel. She was simply watching. She was watching her son dig his own grave, and she hadn't handed him a shovel. She had simply pointed to the softest patch of ground and told him to start. An alliance, unspoken and unnerving, had formed in that moment. Margaret Carter was on her side. Amelia didn't understand why. Mothers were supposed to protect their sons, especially flawed, golden child sons like Daniel. But Margaret was doing the opposite. She was orchestrating his public execution, and the horrifying, gut-wrenching truth was that she was just getting started. With the spotlight firmly on him and his initial denials shattered, Daniel Carter shifted tactics. The cornered animal became a performer. If he was going down, he was going to try and salvage some semblance of sympathy, to recast himself not as the villain, but as a tragic, misunderstood man. He took a deep breath, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair, his face a mask of pained sincerity. He turned, making sure to face Sarah's phone, addressing the thousands of unseen viewers directly. "Look, I know how this looks," he began, his voice taking on a tone of deep, regretful gravitas. "I'm not a perfect man. I made a terrible mistake. A mistake I will regret for the rest of my life." He took a step towards Amelia, who instinctively recoiled. "Amelia," he said, his voice dropping to an intimate whisper, loud enough for the phone's microphone to catch. "I was lost. The pressure of the business since Dad died. It's been immense. I felt like I was drowning, and I sought comfort in the wrong place. It was meaningless. It meant nothing." He turned his gaze on Isabella, and now his expression was one of pity. "And you, Isabella, I know I made you promises. I was weak and I was selfish, and I led you on. I never should have done that. But a future together, a family, that was never real. You have to know that." It was a masterclass in manipulation. In one short speech, he had tried to frame his affair as a cry for help, diminish Isabella's role to a moment of weakness, and apologize to Amelia while simultaneously blaming his actions on external pressures. He was attempting to control the narrative, painting himself as a flawed but ultimately repentant husband, overwhelmed by responsibility. Some of the guests, longtime friends of the family, seemed to soften. A few murmurs of sympathy could be heard. Perhaps Daniel could still salvage this. "So you admit it," Margaret stated, her voice cutting through his performance. It wasn't a question. It was a confirmation for the record. "You admit the affair. You admit you lied to your wife." "Yes, Mother, I admit it," Daniel said, sighing as if the confession was a great weight lifted. "I failed. As a husband and as a man. All I can do now is beg for Amelia's forgiveness and try to earn back her trust, no matter how long it takes." He looked at Amelia, his eyes pleading. "Please, Em, don't let this one mistake destroy everything we've built." But Amelia was seeing him clearly for the first time in a long time. The charming, confident man she had married was gone. In his place was a stranger, a desperate, pathetic liar who was more concerned with public relations than the gaping wound he had torn in their family. The word that came to mind wasn't forgiveness. It was contempt. Isabella, however, was not moved by his performance. She had been promised a future, and she was watching it dissolve on a live stream. "One mistake?" she cried out, her voice sharp with disbelief. "We were together for over a year, Daniel. A year. You told me you loved me. You had me quit my job. You paid the deposit on an apartment for me and the baby, an apartment you said we would live in until the divorce was final." This was new information. A paid apartment. A year-long affair. The bricks of Daniel's defense were being pulled out one by one. "The apartment was a mistake," Daniel said quickly, waving a dismissive hand. "I was trying to help you out. I felt guilty. It wasn't a promise of a future. And the money? Isabella shot back. What about the wire transfers? The tens of thousands of dollars you sent to my account over the last 6 months? Was that just you helping me out, too? Daniel's face went white. This was a detail he clearly hadn't expected her to reveal. Financial transactions were harder to explain away than sweet nothings whispered in the dark. That was a loan, he stammered, his composure beginning to fray again. You were having financial difficulties. I was helping a friend. A friend you were sleeping with, and who is carrying your child, Isabella scoffed. From the edge of the scene, Margaret Carter watched the exchange with the unnerving calm of a chess master watching her opponent walk into a trap she'd set 10 moves earlier. She let Daniel flail, let him twist and turn, offering explanations that grew more convoluted and less believable with every sentence. He was claiming to be a pillar of responsibility, crushed by the weight of his father's legacy, while simultaneously admitting to funding a secret life. He was claiming his affair was a meaningless escape, while Isabella was providing a detailed timeline and a financial paper trail. Emilia watched him, and the last vestiges of love in her heart turned to ash. The man she thought she knew would have owned his mistakes with integrity. This man, this stranger, was flinging mud in every direction, trying to dirty everyone else so he would look cleaner by comparison. He had attacked her character, then tried to paint Isabella as a gold-digging charity case. He had used his dead father's memory as an excuse. His desperate defense wasn't a plea for forgiveness. It was an act of profound cowardice. And as he stood there, sweating under the soft glow of the party lights, Emilia saw the cracks, not just in his story, but in the very foundation of the man himself. He wasn't the strong, capable leader everyone thought he was. He was weak. And she suspected, with a sudden, chilling certainty, that this affair was just the beginning of his deceptions. Margaret must have seen it too. She finally took a step forward, drawing the focus back to her. "Isabella?" she said, her voice even. "You mention large sums of money. Do you have records of these transactions?" Isabella nodded numbly, pulling up her mobile banking app. "Yes. Monthly transfers, always from a personal account, not his main one." Margaret looked at her son. His face was a mask of pure panic. "Daniel," she said, and the temperature in the garden seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Perhaps now is a good time to talk about your personal accounts, specifically the one you opened 6 months ago in the Cayman Islands." The entire party and the tens of thousands watching online went utterly, completely silent. This was no longer just about an affair. This was something else, entirely. Before the bombshell of the Cayman Islands account could fully detonate, Isabella took her chance. She had been cast as a homewrecker, then a delusional stalker, and finally a financial dependent. She needed them to see her not as a caricature, but as a person who had been systematically deceived. "Before we talk about his secret bank accounts," Isabella said, her voice shaking but resolute, "let me tell you who I am." She looked directly at Emilia, a flicker of shared humanity passing between them for the first time. "My name is Isabella Rossi. I was a junior analyst at Sterling Financial, one of the firms that consults for Carter Holdings. That's how I met him." She began to pace slowly, her story unfolding with a painful sincerity. "He sought me out. He told me he was impressed with the report I had written. He started with coffee, then lunch. He was charming, attentive. He made me feel seen. He told me about his life, about the pressure he was under. And he told me about his marriage." Her eyes locked on Emilia again. "He painted a picture of you, Emilia. He said you were a wonderful mother, but that you two had grown apart years ago. That you were more like business partners, co-parenting and maintaining a public image. He said you were both too polite and conflict-averse to admit it was over. He made it sound so tragic and believable. Emilia felt a sickening lurch. Daniel had used the truth of their busy, sometimes disconnected, lives and twisted it into a weapon against them both. He had isolated them from each other with a narrative of polite distance, a narrative he had fed to Isabella to justify his betrayal. He pursued me for months, Isabella continued. I said no, I told him I couldn't be involved with a married man. But he was persistent. He swore it was over in all but name. He showed me that draft of the settlement agreement. He said he was just waiting until after your 30th birthday to tell you. He said he didn't want to ruin such an important milestone for you. He made it sound considerate. The irony was acidic. He had used Emilia's own birthday as a tool in his deception, a deadline in his manufactured timeline of leaving his wife. When I found out I was pregnant, Isabella's voice cracked, and she put a hand on her stomach. I was terrified. But he was so happy, or he pretended to be. He said it was a sign that we were meant to start a new life together. He helped me find the apartment. He sent me money so I could quit my job because the stress was bad for the baby. He promised me he would be there for the birth of our son, Noah. She looked at Daniel, her expression now one of pure scorn. Then, about 3 months ago, he started to change. He became distant. He cancelled our meetings. The money still came, but the calls stopped. He said work was overwhelming. I tried to believe him. But then a friend, who still works at Sterling, sent me a link to a society blog. It was a photo of you and Emilia at a charity gala. The caption read, "Real estate mogul Daniel Carter and his stunning wife Emilia, proving once again that true love is real." You were looking at her, Daniel, with that same smile you used on me. And I knew it was all a lie. She pulled out a small, folded piece of paper from her purse. I did a paternity test as soon as I could. I sent him the results a month ago. 99.999% probability. He never responded. She held out the paper. He hasn't spoken a single word to me since. Her story was complete, detailed, and devastatingly plausible. She wasn't a predator. She was a victim of a practiced predator. He hadn't just cheated on his wife. He had constructed an entirely separate, false reality for his mistress, complete with props like fake legal documents and a carefully curated backstory of a broken marriage. So when I saw on Sarah's Instagram that she was live-streaming this perfect party for his perfect wife, Isabella finished, her eyes flashing with a righteous fire. I decided I was done being his dirty little secret. I was done being the woman he hid in an apartment while he played the devoted husband. If he wouldn't acknowledge his son, then I would make him. In front of everyone, he was trying so hard to impress. The silence that followed was different. It was heavy with the weight of Isabella's truth. She was no longer just the other woman. She was a woman who had been lied to, manipulated, and abandoned. Her explosive arrival was not an act of malice, but an act of desperation. All eyes turned back to Daniel, who looked physically smaller, diminished by the comprehensive totality of his deceit. His blustering defense about being a man under pressure now seemed pathetic and insulting. And it was into this silence, with her son's character now fully exposed, that Margaret Carter chose to deliver the final, killing blow. "Thank you, Isabella, for your honesty," Margaret said, her voice calm and steady. "It confirms a great deal." She looked at Daniel, and for the first time, A flicker of something, pity perhaps, or profound disappointment, crossed her features. "The Cayman Islands account, Daniel," she repeated, her voice leaving no room for escape. "The one you opened the same month you started sending Miss Rossi large sums of money. I think it's time you explained to your wife, your family, and our 100,000 new friends online where that money was coming from, because it certainly wasn't coming from your salary." Daniel Carter's face, already pale, turned a ghastly shade of grey. The affair was a fire he had failed to contain. The revelation of a secret offshore bank account was a nuclear bomb. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, but the words lacked any conviction. He looked at his mother, his eyes wide with a new kind of terror. This wasn't about his marriage anymore. This was about something far more dangerous. Margaret Carter didn't even glance at him. She addressed the silent, captive audience, both in the garden and in the digital ether. Her voice was the calm center of the hurricane she had unleashed. "My late husband, Richard Carter, built Carter Holdings on one principle: integrity. His name and his word were his bond. When he passed, he entrusted our family's legacy to our son." She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "It is the greatest regret of my life that my son has proven himself unworthy of that trust." She finally turned her piercing gaze on Daniel. "For the past year, I have remained a silent partner on the board. I trusted Daniel to lead. But 6 months ago, our CFO, a man who has been with the company for 40 years, came to me with concerns, discrepancies in the accounting for our new flagship project, the Phoenix Towers. Small amounts at first, cleverly hidden within subcontractor invoices and materials purchasing. But they added up. A horrified understanding began to dawn on Amelia's face. This was so much bigger than cheating. I hired a private forensic accounting firm. Discreetly, Margaret continued, her voice as sharp and precise as a surgeon's scalpel. I didn't want to believe it. I told myself there was a logical explanation. But there wasn't. The truth was simple. My son, Daniel Carter, has been systematically embezzling money from his own family's company. The crowd gasped. This was a crime, a real, life-altering, reputation-destroying crime. The investigation traced the siphoned funds to a shell corporation, which then funneled the money to a newly opened account in the Cayman Islands. An account in Daniel's name. Margaret held up her own phone. An account from which regular payments were being made to one Isabella Rossi. He wasn't paying her with his own money. He was paying for his affair with stolen funds. Funds stolen from his employees' pension plans, from his investors, and from the legacy his father bled for. The full, horrifying picture was now complete. The affair wasn't just a moral failing, it was a criminal conspiracy. The money he'd given Isabella was hush money, paid for with embezzled funds. Her pregnancy had likely panicked him, not just because of the personal fallout, but because a public scandal could draw scrutiny to his finances, exposing his far greater crime. His attempts to silence her, to keep her hidden, were not about protecting his marriage. They were about protecting himself from prison. Daniel, Margaret's voice was laced with a chilling sorrow. You used this young woman. You lied to your wife. You dishonored your children. And you spat on your father's grave. All for what? A slightly more lavish lifestyle than the one you already had? To fund this pathetic double life? Daniel was hyperventilating now, looking around wildly for an escape that didn't exist. Mother, no. Please. We can fix this. Internally. We don't have to. Fix this. Margaret's voice rose for the first time, ringing with a righteous fury that made everyone flinch. You have exposed this family to financial ruin and public disgrace. You have committed felonies, Daniel. Did you think I would help you cover this up? That I would choose my criminal son over the honorable company your father built?" She took a deep breath, her composure returning. She looked at Amelia, her eyes filled with a profound, aching apology. "Amelia, my dear, I am so sorry. I am sorry I raised a man so weak, so deceitful. I suspected the affair, but I needed to be certain of the financial crimes before I acted. The live stream. I insisted on it because I knew Daniel's only currency is public perception. I needed to strip that away from him, to leave him with nothing but the ugly truth, exposed for the entire world to see. There could be no spin, no quiet settlements, only a public reckoning." It all clicked into place. Margaret's strange calm, her insistence on the live broadcast. It wasn't a cruel whim. It was a calculated, brutal, necessary strategy. She had used Isabella's personal tragedy as the catalyst to expose Daniel's professional treachery, knowing it was the only way to ensure he couldn't talk his way out of it. She had sacrificed her son's reputation to save the family's legacy. She looked past the cameras, past her guests, to the front gate of their property. As if on cue, the distant blue and red lights of police cars could be seen flashing, growing brighter as they approached the house. "The forensic accountant's full report was sent to the district attorney an hour ago," Margaret announced to the silent yard. "And I believe they are arriving now to ask you some questions, Daniel." Daniel Carter finally broke. A strangled sob escaped his lips, and he sank to his knees on the perfectly manicured lawn, his face in his hands. The golden boy, the charismatic heir, the perfect husband, was utterly and irrevocably destroyed, and his own mother had just handed the world the matches to light his funeral pyre. The arrival of the police turned the surreal spectacle into a grim reality. Detectives, their faces impassive, moved through the stunned party guests as if they were wading through wax figures. The live stream, which Sarah had finally, mercifully ended, had done its job. The story was already a raging wildfire online, with Darjan Carter collapse and Fawzul's mother's justice trending worldwide. Daniel offered no resistance. He was a hollowed-out shell of the man he had been just an hour before. As they led him away in handcuffs, his gaze found Amelia's one last time. There was no anger, no apology, just a vast, empty landscape of defeat. Amelia felt nothing. Not pity, not satisfaction, just a profound and desolate sense of release. The man she had loved had been an illusion, and the illusion had just walked out of her life forever. In the chaotic aftermath, as guests gave hushed statements to the police, and the catering staff quietly packed away the remnants of the disastrous celebration, a strange kind of peace settled over the three women at the center of the storm. Margaret Carter stood by the pool, looking out at the dark water, the reflection of the fairy lights shimmering like fallen stars. The iron mask of control had fallen away, and in its place was the deep, weary grief of a mother who had been forced to condemn her own child. Amelia walked over and stood beside her. For a long moment, they said nothing. "I had to," Margaret finally whispered, her voice rough with unshed tears. "To protect the company, to protect you and the children, to protect what little is left of your father's honor. It was the only way." "I know," Amelia said softly, and to her own surprise, she reached out and took her mother-in-law's hand. It was cold and trembled slightly. "Thank you." The gratitude was for more than just exposing the lies. It was for the brutal, cleansing fire of the truth. Margaret had not tried to patch things up or manage the scandal. She had amputated the diseased limb to save the body, and in doing so, she had given Amelia The one thing she desperately needed. A clean break. There would be no agonizing months of indecision, no couples therapy, no attempts to rebuild a foundation of lies. There was only the ashes, and from ashes, something new could grow. A short distance away, Isabella sat on a patio chair, a police officer taking her statement. Her role in this had shifted from antagonist to key witness. Margaret had already assured her that the family would not abandon her or the child. A trust would be established for the baby, Richard Carter's grandchild, regardless of the circumstances, and top-tier legal counsel would be provided to ensure she was treated as a cooperating witness in Daniel's case, not an accomplice. She was a victim of his manipulations, too. When the officer finished, Isabella approached Amelia hesitantly. "Amelia, I am so sorry for the way this happened, for the pain I caused you tonight." Amelia looked at the young woman, at the life stirring within her husband's son, her children's half-brother. The anger had dissipated, leaving only a complex, weary sadness. "You were lied to, just like I was," Amelia said, her voice even. "He used us both. Tonight you just brought the truth into the light. It was going to come out eventually. You just ripped the bandage off. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was an acknowledgement of a shared wound inflicted by the same man." The days that followed were a blur of lawyers, headlines, and quiet conversations with Leo and Charlotte, explaining in simple terms that Daddy had made big mistakes and needed to go away for a while. But through it all, Amelia was not alone. Margaret was a constant, formidable presence, handling the legal and corporate fallout with ruthless efficiency, shielding Amelia and the children from the worst of the media storm. A new matriarchy was being forged in the rubble of Daniel's destruction. The house, once a symbol of a hollow, gilded life, became a sanctuary of healing. The two women, the wife and the mother, once connected only by their love for a man who had betrayed them both, were now bound by a fierce, mutual respect and a shared determination to build a new future for the Carter family, one based not on charm and appearances, but on the unshakable bedrock of integrity and truth. The party was over, but for Amelia Carter, a new, more authentic life was just beginning. The weeks following what the media had dubbed the birthday party massacre were a masterclass in controlled demolition. Under Margaret Carter's iron-willed guidance, the narrative was swiftly and brutally reshaped. Carter Holdings issued a statement, penned by Margaret herself, expressing profound regret and announcing an immediate, transparent internal audit. She made no excuses for her son. Instead, she positioned the company as his first and most significant victim, vowing to restore its integrity. She was not a mother defending her child. She was a stateswoman saving her nation. Inside the sprawling house, the fairy lights and champagne flutes were gone, replaced by the quiet, purposeful hum of lawyers and accountants. Amelia found herself moving through the familiar rooms, as if in a dream. This home, once her pride and joy, now felt like an elaborate stage set for a play whose lead actor had been abruptly written out. Her first act of reclamation was to pack Daniel's closet. She meticulously folded his expensive suits, boxed up his watches, and stripped the shelves of his custom-made shoes, her movements methodical and devoid of emotion. It wasn't an act of anger, but of sanitation. She was cleansing her space. Leo, ever observant, stood in the doorway of the master bedroom, watching her. "Is Daddy ever coming back from his time out?" he asked, his 7-year-old mind trying to fit the incomprehensible into a familiar framework. Amelia knelt down, pulling him into a hug that was as much for her as it was for him. "Daddy made some very big, adult mistakes, sweetie," she said, choosing her words with care. "He hurt people, and he broke some important rules, so he has to stay away for a long time to fix them. But Grandma and I are here, and we are not going anywhere." It was a promise she intended to keep with every fibre of her being. One afternoon, Margaret found Amelia in the Home Office, staring blankly at a wall of family photos, images of a smiling, happy family that now felt like a collection of beautiful lies. "The board is meeting tomorrow," Margaret said, her voice gentle but firm. She held out a leather-bound folder. "They've accepted Daniel's resignation, effective immediately. They've asked me to step in as interim CEO." "Of course they did," Amelia said. "You're the only one who can save it." "I can stabilize it," Margaret corrected. "But saving it requires more than just financial acumen. It requires a new face, a new promise." She slid the folder onto the desk in front of Amelia. "Carter Holdings has established a new charitable foundation. Its mission will be to fund urban renewal projects, focusing on community arts and affordable housing, the very things Daniel cut funding from to finance his excesses. The board has unanimously approved its first chairperson, you." Amelia stared at her, stunned. "Me?" "Margaret, I'm a gallery curator. I don't know anything about running a foundation." "You know about integrity, Amelia. You know about community. And right now, the world knows you as the woman who stood with Grace while her world was torn apart. They see you as a symbol of resilience. Daniel used our family's name to destroy things. You will use it to build them back up. Your story is now inextricably linked with this company's. Let's give them a new chapter to read." It was a brilliant move, both personally and professionally. It gave Amelia a purpose beyond her victimhood, a platform to channel her quiet strength into tangible action. It was a lifeline, and she grabbed it. The final piece of the new architecture had to be placed a week later. The meeting was Margaret's idea, held in the sanitized neutrality of her lawyer's downtown office. The air was thick with unspoken complexities as Amelia and Margaret sat across a polished mahogany table from Isabella Rossi. Isabella looked different. Away from the high drama of the party, she seemed younger, more vulnerable. Her defiance had been replaced by a quiet, weary resolve. Margaret got straight to the point, outlining the legal and financial arrangements. A trust, funded personally by Margaret, had been created for the child, who would be legally recognized as a Carter. It would cover all expenses for his health, welfare, and education through university. It was meticulously detailed, generous, and completely unconditional. "My grandson will want for nothing," Margaret stated, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. "But he will also not be used as leverage by anyone, ever. His privacy and yours will be paramount." Isabella listened, nodding slowly. When Margaret was finished, she looked not at the matriarch, but at Amelia. "Thank you," she said, her voice soft. "I never wanted any of this. The money. Daniel made it feel like I was being bought. Silenced. This feels different. This is for my son." She took a deep breath. "I'm planning to move back home to Oregon to be with my family before the baby comes. Noah, he deserves a life far away from this scandal." Amelia felt a knot in her chest loosen. For weeks, the idea of this child had been an abstraction, a symbol of Daniel's ultimate betrayal. But seeing Isabella, hearing the name Noah spoken with a mother's love, shifted something inside her. This child was innocent. He was her children's brother. "When he's older," Amelia found herself saying, the words surprising even her. "When he's old enough to understand, I want him to know who his siblings are. and I want Leo and Charlotte to know him. Whatever happened between his father and me, it's not the children's burden to carry." A tear escaped Isabella's eye and slid down her cheek. It was a moment of profound, unexpected grace. In that room, the three women, once locked in a triangle of betrayal, made a silent pact. They would not be defined by the man who had connected and broken them. They would be defined by the future they chose to build for the next generation. Margaret, the architect of justice, Emilia, the builder of a new legacy, and Isabella, the guardian of an innocent new life. The past was a ruin, but together they were laying the foundation for something stronger. What an incredible story of betrayal, lies, and the shocking power of a mother's ultimate justice. Emilia's perfect world was built on a foundation of secrets, but it took two women, the wife and the mistress, both deceived by the same man, and a mother who chose honor over blood to bring the entire corrupt structure crashing down. This story is a powerful reminder that the truth, no matter how brutal, is the only thing that can truly set you free. It shows us that strength can be found in the most unexpected alliances, and that sometimes you have to burn everything to the ground to see the dawn of a new day. What would you have done if you were Emilia or Margaret? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of drama and unbelievable twists kept you on the edge of your seat, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share this video with someone who loves a story where justice is served in the most spectacular way. And most importantly, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss our next real-life drama. Thank you for listening.